Hey guys, welcome back to Reading with Teachers. I'm Mrs. Gilbert and we are back with our guy Lewis Carroll. The title is Through the Looking Glass. So let's get on to Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is titled Wool and Water. She caught the shawl and looked about for the owner. Soon the White Queen came running wildly through the woods with both arms stretched out wide as if she were flying, and Alice went to meet her with the shawl. "I'm very glad I happened to be in the way," Alice said. She helped put on her shawl again. The White Queen only looked at her and whispered, "Bread and butter, bread and butter." Alice asked the White Queen timidly, "Am I addressing the White Queen?" "Well, yes, if you call that addressing," the Queen said. "It isn't my idea of addressing." "If your Majesty will only tell me the right way to address you, I'll do it the best that I can." "But I don't want it done at all," groaned the poor Queen. "I've been addressing myself for the last 2 hours." "But everything's crooked," thought Alice, "with pins sticking out all over." She added aloud, "May I put your shawl on straight for you?" "I don't know what's the matter with it," the Queen said. "It's not behaving, I guess. I've pinned it here, I've pinned it there, but there's no pleasing it." "It can't go straight if you pin it all on one side," Alice said, as she gently fixed it for her. "And dear me, what a mess your hair is." "The brush has gotten entangled in it," the Queen said with a sigh, "and I lost the comb yesterday." Alice carefully released the brush and fixed her hair nicely. "You look much better now," she said, "but really you should have a lady's maid." "I'm sure you will do just fine," the Queen said. 2 pennies a week and jam every other day." Alice couldn't help laughing. "I don't want you to hire me, and I don't care for jam." "It's very good jam," said the Queen. "Well, I don't want any today." "You couldn't have had it if you did want it," the Queen said. "The rule is jam tomorrow and jam yesterday, but never jam today." "It must come sometimes to jam today." "No, it can't," said the Queen. "It's jam every other day. Today isn't any other day, you know." "I don't understand. It's confusing," said Alice. "That's what it is like living backwards," the Queen said kindly. "It always makes one feel a little strange at first." "Living backwards?" Alice repeated. "I never heard of such a thing." "But there's one great advantage in it. That one's memory works both ways." "I'm sure mine only works one way," Alice remarked. "I can't remember things before they happen. What do you remember best?" "Oh, things that happen the week after next. For instance," the Queen went on, putting a large bandage on her finger as she spoke. "There's the king's messenger. He's in prison now, being punished. And the trial doesn't even begin till next week. Of course, the crime will happen last of all, and, her voice became a squeak. Alice was just about to say, "That can't be right," when the Queen started to scream so loud that she could not finish her sentence. "Oh, oh, oh!" shouted the Queen, shaking off her hand as if she wanted to shake it off. "My finger's bleeding! Oh, oh!" Her screams were so much like the whistle of a steam engine that Alice had to hold both her hands over her ears. "What is the matter?" Alice said, as soon as there was a chance of making herself heard. "Have you pricked your finger?" "I haven't pricked it yet," the Queen said, "but I soon shall." "Oh!" When do you expect to do it?" Alice asked, feeling like laughing. "When I fasten my shawl again," the poor Queen groaned. "The brooch will come undone. Oh!" As she said the words, the brooch flew open and the Queen clutched it wildly and tried to clasp it again. "Be careful!" cried Alice. "You're holding it all crooked." And she reached for the brooch, but it was too late. The pin had slipped, and the Queen had pricked her finger. "That is why I am bleeding, you see," she said to Alice with a smile. "Now you understand the way things happen here." "But why don't you scream now?" Alice asked. holding her hand ready to put over her ears again. Why, I've done all the screaming already, said the Queen. What would be the good of having it all over again? By this time it was starting to get light. The crow must have flown away, I think, said Alice. I'm so glad it's gone. I thought it was the night coming on. I wish I could manage to be glad, the Queen said, only I never can remember the rule. You must be happy being so glad. How old are you? I'm 7.5, exactly. You needn't say exactually, the Queen said. I believe it without that. Now I'll give you something to believe. I'm just 101 5 months and a day. I can't believe that, said Alice. Can't you? The Queen said. Try again. Draw a long breath and shut your eyes. Alice laughed. There's no use trying, she said. I can't believe impossible things. I dare say you haven't had much practice, said the Queen. When I was your age, I always did it for half an hour each day. Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Oh, there goes the shawl again! The brooch had come undone, and a sudden gust of wind blew the Queen's shawl across a little brook. The Queen spread out her arms again and went flying after it. I've got it, she cried. Now you shall pin it on again, all by myself. Then I hope your finger is better now, Alice said very politely, as she crossed the little brook after the Queen. Oh, much better, cried the Queen, her voice rising to a squeak as she went on. Much better, 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 better. The last word ended in a long bleat, so much like a sheep that Alice was startled. She suddenly looked at the Queen, who seemed to have suddenly wrapped herself up in wool. Alice rubbed her eyes and looked again. Was she in a little dark shop? And was that really a sheep with glasses that was sitting on the other side of the counter? Knitting? What is it you want to buy? The sheep said at last, looking up from her knitting. I don't know yet, Alice said very gently. I would like to look around first, if I might. You may look in front of you, and on both sides, if you like, said the sheep. But you can't look all around you, unless you've got eyes at the back of your head. Alice did not have eyes in the back of her head, so she kept turning around and around, looking at the shelves as she came to them. The shop was full of curious things, but the oddest part about all of it was whenever Alice looked hard at any shelf to see what was on it, that particular shelf was always empty, but the other shelves around it were still quite full. Things sure do change quickly here, she said. She had spent a minute or so chasing a large bright thing that looked sometimes like a doll and sometimes like a workbox, and seemed to keep moving to the next highest shelf. Are you a child or a spinning top? The sheep said, as she picked up another pair of needles. You'll make me dizzy soon if you keep turning around like that. She was now working with 14 pairs at once, and Alice couldn't help looking at her in great astonishment. I forgot to show you the picture. How can she knit with so many? Alice thought to herself. She looks like a porcupine. Can you row? The sheep asked, handing her a pair of knitting needles as she spoke. Yes, a little, but not on land, and not with needles, Alice was beginning to say, when suddenly the needles turned into oars in her hands, and she found they were in a little boat gliding along between the banks of a river. You'll be catching a crab soon, said the sheep. A dear little crab, thought Alice. I would like that. Please tell me, where are the crabs? In the water, of course. The sheep picked up several more needles and stuck some in her hair. The boat glided gently through tangled weeds. Alice did her best at rowing as she looked about. She caught sight of some lovely water grass and cried out in delight, "Oh, please, there are some scented rushes." You needn't say please to me about 'em, the sheep said without looking up from her knitting. I didn't put 'em there, and I'm not going to take 'em away. No, but I meant, please may we pick some, Alice pleaded, if you don't mind stopping the boat for a minute. How am I to stop it? Asked the sheep. If you stop rowing, it'll stop itself. Alice stopped rowing, and the boat drifted down the stream until it glided gently in among the waving rushes. Alice pushed up her sleeves and plunged her arms into the water to get hold of the rushes. And for a while Alice forgot all about the sheep and the knitting. She bent over the side of the boat, with just the ends of her tangled hair dripping into the water, while with bright eyes she caught at one bunch after a bunch of this darling scented rushes. I hope the boat won't tipple over, she said to herself. Oh, what a lovely one! Only I can't quite reach it, she said at last. With a sigh, and with flushed cheeks and dripping hair and hands, she scrambled back into her place and began to arrange her newfound treasures. They hadn't gone much farther when one of the oars got stuck in the water and wouldn't come out again. The handle of it was caught under her chin, and it swept Alice straight off the seat and down into the heap of rushes. The sheep went on with her knitting just as if nothing had happened. That was a nice crab you caught, she remarked, as Alice got back into her place, very much relieved to find herself still in the boat. Was it? I didn't see it, said Alice, peeping over the side of the boat into the dark water. I wish I hadn't let it go. I would like to see a little crab to take one home with me. But the sheep only laughed and went on with her knitting. Are there many crabs here? Asked Alice. Crabs and all sorts of things, said the sheep. Plenty of choices. Only make up your mind. Now what do you want to buy? To buy? Alice echoed in confusion, for the oars and the boat and the river had vanished, and she was back in the little dark shop. I would like to buy an egg, please, she said timidly. How do you sell them? 5 pence farthing for one, 2 pence for two, the sheep replied. Then 2 are cheaper than 1, Alice said in a surprised tone, taking out her purse. Only you must eat them both if you buy 2, said the sheep. Then I'll have 1, please, said Alice as she put the money down on the counter. After all, she thought, they may not be very tasty. The sheep took the money and put it away in a box. Then she said, I never put things in people's hands. That would never do. You must get it for yourself. And she went off to the other end of the shop and set the egg on a shelf. I wonder why it wouldn't do, thought Alice. She made her way among the tables and chairs, for the shop was very dark toward the end. The egg seemed to get further away the more I walked toward it. Let me see. Is this a chair? Why, it's got branches, I declare. How very odd to find trees growing here. And actually, here's a little brook. Well, this is certainly the most curious shop I ever saw. So she went on, as everything turned into a tree the moment she came up to it, and she quite expected the egg to do the same. Okay, chapter 6 is next. Humpty Dumpty. We'll get there next. See you guys next time.